Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. All here for coming. I think that in today's world of exuberance and inflated marketing claims and even fake news, to be among the real thing, namely people who have actually performed and achieved something, is quite a privilege. So I am very privileged to be here with a group of individuals who are exceptional in what they do, and that should be a good framework for the award we're going to give. My role is to give you a bit of background on the Lifetime Achievement Award so that you understand the hurdle that Piyush had to overcome in order to be awarded that. It is by no means an easy feat. The award is decided by a panel of advisors chaired by Professor Dr. Alain Chevalier, former Dean of ESCP, a leading university in France. We have another member from the United States, Todd Burwell, who is the president and CFO of BAFT, which is Bankers Association for Finance and Trade, was also a former banker, and then I'm sort of the secretary of that, as you said, as a scholar and an investor, also in financial institutions over the last 40 years. We sit on 3 continents, and we have well over 100 years of experience, so it gets to some very interesting discussions, and it's by no means easy to master the hurdle. The Lifetime Achievement Award is the most prestigious award of, for me it's still the Asian Banker, because I've been associated with Emmanuel since over 20 years, but let's call it Tab Global. And it is highly recognized, and it is not given away lightly. It's called the William Bill Seidman Award because Bill was a friend of the Asian Banker, a supporter of the Asian Banker, and a guiding light. He was an eminent personality in the finance industry in the United States, and is still highly respected and revered in the United States. And in his honor, we are named the Lifetime Achievement Award, the William Bill Seidman. In looking at a range of candidates that the research people from Tab Global produce, we actually apply a set of measures. And I'm always reminded that you can check that on the website, but then I'm a Renaissance man. So I don't check everything on the website or the telephone. So sparing you the work of everybody putting out their telephones and checking what the criteria are, I will quickly comment on them because it is quite interesting. Number 1 is the time spent in the industry. Now that's pretty obvious. If it's a Lifetime Achievement Award, then obviously we expect you to spend a lifetime in the industry. This is not a short-term one-match sort of award. The second thing is recognition by peers. We do interviews with people, some of them are here. We ask them how they respect, how they see their colleagues, and we find reasons to underline the respect that the individual carries with its peers. We have institutional performance. Yes, there's a performance element. So the individual has probably a leading role or a co-leading role in an institution, and this institution should be doing pretty well. But that's also self-explanatory. We then have the ability to handle failure. That makes it a little bit more difficult. It's a bit more research. But I think in your case, you also started something, a startup. You will hear more in the citation by Emmanuel, and had to handle failure and distress and challenges, and you did very well. So that's also one criterion. And we then have character under pressure. We would expect individuals in moments of tense and difficult environments, like we have today, a good test for everybody, to actually handle themselves well and to apply sound judgment that with hindsight proves to be correct. That's more or less one of the things is hindsight is a very exact science. Afterwards, everybody knows better. But we want to have people that made a decision and are proven right with hindsight. We have then leadership in times of change, probably the most important criterion today, because change is permanent and it's getting more vicious, it's getting more unexpected, and without commenting on anything, sort of more surprising, because we really don't know where we stand, and that is very important. And we look for how people deal with technological, geopolitical, and other environmental challenges. And finally, there's integrity and instinct. I define integrity as you say what you mean what you say, and you have a certain quorum of decency, and that is very important. And we have individuals who actually prove that multiple times. The award has gone to some very prominent people. Our MC, or charming MC, I would like to say, has actually named some. I have a few here. Thi Hong Pyo, sorry for the pronunciation, the visionary leader of public bank in Malaysia. Wee Cho Yo, who helped to shape the Singapore banking sector. And of course, Cesar Virata, the former Prime Minister of the Philippines and Vice Chairman of Rizal Commercial Bank, statesman and a banker. And if you read what's happening in the Philippines, you understand the challenges of being a point of stability in the Philippines, because this seems to be sort of almost impossible. One final thing, I would like to commend a colleague on the table, Jason Chow from Huawei, who kindly sponsored this lunch. Thank you, Jason, for coming. Thank you for the sponsorship. And thank you, Huawei, for all the good things you're doing. As you know, Huawei is a leading technology solutions provider in many areas. And despite some bumps in the road, which entirely due to certain political and geopolitical circumstances, has proven to be very resilient and move from strength to strength. So it's very befitting that they are sponsoring a lifetime achievement, because they have done very well. So that's in a nutshell what people are up in the Lifetime Achievement Award. And I'll finish with the good news. After this, you are one step closer to lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, our beautiful MC, and thank you, everyone. I'm Jason. I'm from the Huawei headquarters. Actually, I just came here last night. So first of all, thanks the Asian banker gave this such a great opportunity. Actually, before I came, I was told I got a chance to say something as a welcome speech. I thought this is quite interesting. As a Chinese guy, stay here for one night. Welcome a Singaporean here, okay? You're welcome. Okay. It's also because the theme of today is it's a leadership. Also, Cindy, the Tab China CEO, told me, she's a very nice lady. I asked her, what should I talk? She told me, yeah, the theme is about leadership. You should talk about leadership. Oh my God, And I think a lot of you is more senior than me, much more senior than me. Actually, I see a great bankers and great leaders here. I, from Huawei, I'm the head of Huawei Global FSI business. But actually, what I can tell you is I never worked a single day in a bank. The most places I visited was branch before, but in the last 10 years, I've never been to the branches. I took this position since 7 years ago. I asked my boss, what should I do? Next step, he said, okay, take the bank, a global financial business. I said, I never worked at a bank. He said, oh, this is what we want. I was lucky, we could see the banking industry, financial industry from the technology side. So for me, I think the leadership, first principle for me, I think it is to be humble. Yeah, because you see a lot of great people. Yeah, you have to learn from them. Yeah, and to be curious. You have got a lot of things to learn. That's why, after thanks to Asia Bank, I also want to say something about the why I came here. And I want to thank DBS, thanks Piyush and Sushan, all of great bankers. In the year 2018, when I was moved to this position, I thought I should learn from someone. Then I got Brett King, he participated in the Huawei event. I got a dinner with him. I asked Brett King, hi Brett, which bank doing the best in terms of the digital? Gave me a list. I want to learn from them. Actually, he gave me 5 names. Yeah, and one of them is DBS. And so it was really, really lucky. In the last 7 years, I learned a lot. Actually, the journey from my thought, who is doing best in terms of digital, is starting from DBS. I learned a lot in the last years from the DBS story, from Piyush. Yeah, and I think later I should check with you because I was told in the very early beginning, DBS means damn bloody slow. Yes, and before 2009, but in the last 16 years, you really did a great job, totally changed. Yeah, and now the people told me it means Digital Bank of Singapore. Yeah, actually, I love to tell the story. I don't mind if it's true or not, but it really presents a great story, how a company have been through, do the right things. Yeah, so that's why when I talk to Cindy from Asian Bank, I said, if this is the event, 100% I should be there. Yeah, because this is not only my teacher in banking, it's also Huawei's teacher. Our founder always told us, the customer, always the best teacher you should learn. Yeah, so that's why I came here. Back to the point, because I also think about what is the leadership. Today I think different people have different points, different view on that. But first of all, I think the leadership is really, really, it's needed more than ever today. The world is really getting separated, fragile. On one hand, we see the prosperous side. On the other hand, it's really, breaking news happening every day. I think we need the great leadership than ever. Otherwise, what we lose is not just the lunch. We may lose more, right? But today, I'm sure everyone will get lunch. Yeah. So that's why what our understanding, so following the guidance from Asian Bank, also, the last 6 years is really, really tough for Huawei. Everyone knows what is the reason. Yeah. The intention was to kill Huawei. Actually, today Huawei is still there, still survive. Yeah. Actually, you can see last year the revenue will grow more than 20%. We're still there. We think the leadership today is more important than ever. First of all, I think it's not just a peak to be admired. Yeah. It is really the motivation to move forward. It's not a perfect thing. It is encouraged to find out uncertainties. Yeah. And it is not the standard answer, we think. Because sometimes you don't have the standard answer like today. What the human race we are facing. No standard answer, but it's a possibility to explore. Yeah. So for us, that's a very, very difficult year. Yeah. What I learned not from DBS, also from Singapore. Why? Actually, this year in the New Year, Chinese New Year's time, I took my parents here. I showed them, this is the banks I'm working with. Actually, they are too old. They don't understand so well what is the financial center means. But they feel also the prosperity, the greatness of Singapore. Yeah, and actually, I took them to the Fullerton Hotel. We live in a Fullerton Hotel. I took them see, this is DBS, this is OCBC, this is whatever, UOB, all the bankers. I show them. I think it's good. I want them to see what I'm doing all the time. For sure, they don't understand so well from that, but I think they can feel that. I think Mr. Lee Kuan-yew from 60 years ago really finding a new path for this country. Actually, I really admire him. Yeah, I have a lot of book about me, Mr. Lee Kuan-yew. Yeah, he really find a path has no one have ever succeeded on. With such a small population, small land, poverty, yeah, just decades we've been here. China today, we see the great side of China. Actually, we learn a lot from Singapore. Yeah, we learn a lot. That's why today I'm really thankful to DBS. We, as a Huawei, we are doing the digital transformation with the global banks. We learn a lot. I remember what Piyush, you had told in the interview, said why the bank need to do the digital transformation? Because of the customer behavior changing. Also, I remember what you last time shared. In the year 2014, you visited China, you talked to Alibaba. Yeah? When you hear that, this is the way they were thinking, the bank, the financial services, you were very much shocked. That's why last time you shared with us. You think this is the way of the future bank. As a traditional bank, we must change. Actually, this is a great thing, more than 10 years ago. This is also the words I often told my global customers. We got to change. Yeah, we got to change like that. And the Gandalf plan, to be honest, the Gandalf plan is very famous. In China, all the bankers, you cannot imagine, even the small bankers in China, when I talk to them, the DBS transformation story, they didn't know the damn bloody story. But a lot of people know the Gandalf plan. Yeah, you know, that's really inspiring for us. And especially the last 6 years, it was great journey between DBS and Huawei. You know, we start from zero. At that time, you know, in year 2019, worldwide we serve for 1,300 financial customers. But how much can you imagine today? We already serve for 5,600 global financial customers. It's more than 3,000 outside China. You know, something couldn't kill you, it make you stronger. Especially, I remember the story when the COVID started. Yeah, you know, all the words from my head, I remember every page of our story. When the COVID started, one day our local team got a call from DBS. They said, Huawei, Kai, I probably need your help. What? Because the people cannot go to the office, but we have to keep the financial service works. We need to set up a VDI system, yeah, VDI system which make the people working at home to access to the network. Can you help? We asked them, okay, what time do you need this? They told me, no deadline, just fast, as soon as possible. Actually, this was the first project we have ever done. No project plan. No project plan. You know, no orders. No any pre-notice. You just got a call, say, please help. To be honest, this is something we never face. And our people, we fully understand what does that mean, because you have to serve for your customers. And it was a very famous story, we call it 28-hour story. Our people walked to like a hill. We went to all of the stock, all of the lab, because we need a lot of equipment. We find each single piece of space equipment. Finally, we took 28 hours. 28 hours later, ready for service. Actually, normally it may take 1 or 2 months. You know, that was a great story. Later on, DBS told Huawei, we appreciate. Yeah, because we see the customer-centric. We told them this is our core philosophy. This is already in our blood. We also see the DBS serve for customer. This is the value of the enterprises. I think this is also part of the leadership. Find the true value. Yeah, not only direction, also the true value. It is work for the customers. So basically for Huawei, I think we still in a very, I think it's not easy. It's still in a tough situation. All our CEO and founder is telling us is no for time for celebration. What we do every day is for survival. We still told the people for survival. But the leadership here is we need to find out in the fog what is the right direction. I remember when the sanctions started a few years ago, there was an interview with our founder. The host said, probably this is the most difficult time for Huawei. Our founder said, no, this is the best time of us. because we never see the people work more united than today, on the same pace to the same direction. Yeah, yeah. So that is what we do, and we think, yeah, we will survive. Yeah, we not only work for DBS, we also, for example, work with a lot of banks like ICBC in China. They already managed to have built the largest cloud. All of the business is already on cloud. In Latin America, we work with the Itaú. I think this is also the leadership, to the courage to change, And also we hope in the future we will keep working, under the leadership of Sushan with the DBS team, for the future success. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate this great opportunity, and I take all of you as my teachers. I think later on, please help me. Yeah, I think I got a lot of things to learn, and thank you to the great leaders. Okay, thank you.
We are going to have a conversation between Mr. Emmanuel Daniel, founder and chairman of Tab Global, and of course, Mr. Piyush Gupta, the man of the hour, and the recipient of this year's William Bill Seidman Lifetime Achievement Award. Together, they will reflect on the pivotal decisions, defining moments, and hard-earned lessons from an extraordinary leadership journey, and explore what the future holds for banking and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Emmanuel Daniel and Mr. Piyush Gupta.
Piyush, there are lots of people out there in the industry who think that you don't like me. And there are lots of people in the industry who think that I have a problem with you. So
the last time we were together on a stage was at an event in Toronto.
Oh my goodness, you still
They
remember that?
They
That was
created this thing like a boxing ring. And we were sparring with each other.
And last night, Ong Aibun, no less, reminded me of that. He said, how did you get him on the stage with you this time? And that was the last reference that he had. The interesting thing is that, in a way, we kept each other honest, over time. And you've given many interviews, and so this is not the day to go through strategy and how the bank is run. This is the day to look inside the person. So I want to talk about you and go deep into you as a person, and then to be able to capture something that each of us can take away. What does it mean to dedicate your life to a career and then have the opportunity to travel through it and reach a zenith of sorts? And I want to ask questions which are a little off the cuff, but sort of captures things that have not been said before. If your children were here, you've got 2 children, and they were talking about you, how do you think their reference of you would be? What do you think they would say about you as a father, as someone that they see on media, and they follow as a third person looking back in?
Thanks, and thanks for having me here. Honestly, my kids are very proud of me. And that's obviously enormously satisfying. Your kids, even now, look up to you. They're both in banking. One's at Barclays, one's at JP Morgan. And I still feel kind of privileged that they will call me every once in a while for ideas, thoughts, and education. So maybe something I say does make sense to them. But I think if you talk to them, they will reflect and comment more on my personal as opposed to my professional side. I've always tried to stay authentic, right? And so I've never built a facade or the airs and graces of a CEO. So I'm quite regular with all kinds of people. And my kids will tell you that. I talk to everybody on the street, put my arm around everybody on the street, which is a little dicey in the days of Me Too. But that's just me. And my kids will tell you that I'm actually, what you see is what you get. I am a very authentic person.
So I'll go straight into hard questions. What was the lowest point in your life?
Honestly, I've been privileged. I did not have too many disappointments or failures in life. So academics, we had a good family. And when you really get down to it, therefore, some of my biggest achievements and successes have been around my profession. but also some of my disappointments have also therefore been around the profession. And even with DBS the last year, I've told my people, we made mistakes. One of the mistakes that became quite visible in the last few years was the technology snafus we had. I think we did a lot of things right, but obviously told us that we didn't do some things right. And so when you feel that, you let yourself down and you let people down, that's not a good place to me.
And who did you let down most of all?
Well, here's the thing. We've been sort of voted the world's best digital bank several years. We sort of transformed the technology. Our stakeholders and board trusted us, the country. Citizens trusted us for what we had done. And then when you go through a year where you're basically, not up to standard. But a lot of people said, tech challenges happen to everybody. But for us, we set the bar here. And then when you don't live up to the bar you set over here, you castigate yourself. So you feel like you let down a whole bunch of different stakeholders.
And I noticed during one of the several, downtimes that DBS experienced, especially the one in Singapore, the people who fronted it with the public were your Singapore head, were others long before you came into the picture. At which point does the buck stop with you?
But always stops him. But you have to figure who needs to get visibility and be the face and for what reason. So we debated a lot about who should front this. And it just seemed to us that the Singapore country head was the right person to front it. Actually, my colleagues talked me out of fronting it, saying, actually, we should let the Singapore country head. Partly it is empowerment. So, the public should figure you have confidence in overseeing, but it's not a one-man show. It is never a one-man show. But how do you demonstrate to people that it's not a one-man show, that there is a team and there are a lot of people who come together? But, at the end of the day, when you're CEO, you accept the upside of being CEO. A lot of things you're not directly responsible for, but you take the upside. And therefore, you take the downside as well. Finally, like I said, you got to be able to accept the burden of challenge. One of the things I've always believed in, though, is you also got to be able to let your people know you have the back and give them air cover. And so I've always believed that. Finally, you have to be accountable because the air cover comes from you. You cannot push the pressure, the issues, and blame down the organization. Otherwise, you kill the organization.
And in your career, right through from the beginning of your career and over time, who have been your inspiration? The people that you've looked up to, emulated, and maybe they come and they go.
So, Emmanuel, as you reflected and commented when I first became CEO, I had a very unusual background for a CEO because my first decade in banking, I did not do the traditional stuff of being an investment banker or being from the markets discipline. I spent a large amount of my formative years in operations, technology, product management, running finance, strategy, middle office functions, etc. And so my first role models and mentors all came from those disciplines. And I owe them a lot. The guy called Bharat Sarpeshko was a good friend of mine still in the US. Aditya Puri, who ran HDFC Bank in India, as an example. The guy here called Venki Krishna Kumar in Singapore. And these people, essentially helped me stretch. They taught me the value of people management and management disciplines. They taught me the value of detail and focus. But most of all, they took bets on me and allowed me to stretch. And I always believe that the best way to learn is to really stretch people. The best way to teach people is stretch. And so my first decade, I had a very unusual background and very unusual learning. I owe a lot to my leaders at that point in time. My second decade in banking, I moved to Singapore. And in my Singapore phase, I became much bigger because of the multi-country, regional, etc. In that period, I wound up indirectly working with John Reed a couple of times. John had set up some task forces in the early 90s, and then he wanted to create a strategy group for emerging markets in the mid-90s. And I had the opportunity to work on the task forces and then lead the strategy group. So in a way, John became a bit of a mentor through the 90s. In fact, when I quit banking in between to try my .com, John spent half a day first trying to talk me out of it. And then he spent the next 3 hours the next morning, having stepped over it, telling me he thought I was doing the right thing, I should go and, try this thing out. So he was quite relevant. The last person I want to call out is my last chairman, Peter Seah. So a lot of people have found Peter not easy to work with. For me, he was just fantastic. His sense for banking and his ability to distinguish between the role of a chairman and an executive CEO to come in where necessary but let you run was quite exceptional as well.
Now, here's the big trick question, which is, at which point does a manager become a leader? At which point does someone who spent a career in an industry like banking, which forces you to specialize, to go into a silo, to be really good at what you do, to then break away and take that leadership type thinking, which requires you to have a helicopter view, then you start putting it together.
So, I have a contrary view. I think this notion that you've got to be a domain expert first and then rise up is a flawed view. And you think about what some of the firms like HSBC or Citibank did in the 60s and 70s, George Moore and Walter Eston. They created a cadre of people who they moved around very rapidly, very early in their career. So they tried to build the lateral view, the horizontal, before trying to actually specialize in a particular domain. And I did that. I used to tell people I did 22 assignments in 25 years, and I did everything. And each assignment was first a few months and then a year or 2 years. But I found a lot of value from having done a bunch of things. And therefore, this idea of being able to think strategically, lead, etc., was actually very early on. My last role in my late 20s in India was Aditya's chief of staff. And I ran strategy, I ran technology, I ran HR, I ran product management, I ran everything. So you had to be big, but you also had to be nitty-gritty. So you picked up the skill fairly early. But I think, just to your question, there were two leapfrog moments in my career. One was I told you in the 90s, through the mid-90s to the late 90s. I was doing well, so they gave me two substantive leadership roles. One was to run transaction banking for City in Asia, and then some of the Kiju I hired at that time as a management trainee. So that was a big leadership role, multi-country, you ran a big business, and you got the chance to shape strategy. And then I ran Indonesia for them at that time. So that step up, when you really run the next level, this thing, that's an important step up. And I think the other thing was obviously DBS. I was division head for Citibank before I moved. I was running 10 countries. But DBS gives you a different flavor because it's a listed board-run company. And, no matter how senior you are in Citibank, you're still actually being driven by headquarters. When you run headquarters, you're calling the shots, you're a board-run company. That takes a very different element of leadership. It also caused me to change my leadership style over time.
At which point did you become Singaporean?
So I made the choice to retire in Singapore. I moved back to Singapore the third time in 2007. And I made the choice to retire in Singapore in 2006. I was in Malaysia. And my wife and I talked about it and said, where do we want to put down roots and retire and live? And then, having lived in Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore, we said, okay, Singapore is the best place to be. So in terms of using my head, I became Singapore and became citizen in 2009. In terms of the migration from head to heart, that takes longer. Because culturally, a lot of my affinity was Indian Bollywood, Indian cricket. But I realized along the way, the one day when I realized that I was Singaporean, when Kwan Yu, our badminton chap, was playing the Indian badminton people, and I was rooting for Singapore. But I was rooting for Singapore and not for India. And that's when you know that you had a shift in heart.
Okay, at that point you became Singaporean. Do you feel Singaporean today?
Oh, completely. If you look at one of the things I'm proud of is over the last 16 years, I think I played a role in putting Singapore banking and finance on the world map. And I've done that wearing a Singapore hat and a Singaporean heart. It's never been India or an Indian thing. It's always been a Singapore hat and heart out there. And I have, taken on Indians and other people in the defense of Singapore. So yes, completely.
What were the inflection points in the industry that you were a purveyor of, meaning that you were an icon of an era, and that era is ended, and you've passed on the baton to this poor lady, right? At a time when there's
I don't think she's such a poor lady, by the way.
incredible, geopolitical changes taking place. You couldn't have chosen a better time to step down. and then to hand the baton over to someone who will be overseeing a dimension of the bank that didn't exist in your time, basically.
Hey, man, and, it's not, I'd say the industry has evolved considerably in different ways. Until the 70s, we were famously called the 363 industry. Right? You took money at 3%, you loaned it out at 6%, and went to play golf at 3 o'clock. Right? And that is pretty true because, the banker in a small community, he was the Lord of Master. People came to your door because you had the money. But if you look at the 80s and 90s, there's a really important change, two important changes. One is that banks have to start going out to hustle for business. And so a marketing orientation, relationship managers, account managers, going out and looking for business, the competitive dynamic changed. So the industry evolved to being outward focused. The other thing that changed, I think John Reed was part of it, is consumer banking became an industry. He wrote his famous memo from the beach in the mid-70s. But in the 80s and 90s, the idea that you could build a business around an individual as opposed to just around companies, that came to being. And therefore, a lot of credit card businesses and mortgage businesses and so on, I'm thinking of them as a business as opposed to just a service to provide to customer. All of that evolved. So if you look at the banking of the 80s and 90s, it's a very different kind of banking. And then if you look at 90s and turn of the century, I call it the more egregious part of our development industry, and the rise of the investment banking universe and the rise of egregious compensation in our industry and, moving away from fundamentals of real things to real people, but being a little bit more self-serving and esoteric products and so on. That was a phenomena of the, 90s and 2000s, right? So the industry has not been static. It evolves over time. Now, your point is correct. I think the biggest evolution in the last 20 years has been technology in banking. So I've said before, I still believe it. But it's not just true for banking. Technology is the business. It's not just true for banking because I think every industry is tech. If you've not understood that technology is a fundamental important thing, which is it not only lets you do things differently, but more importantly, it changes consumer behavior. The consumer used to believe that I've got to take half a day off to come to the bank. Banking is a thing. And technology blew that away. Banking is no longer a thing. Banking is a means to a thing, right? So I don't need a credit card. I want to buy a meal. I don't need a mortgage. I need to buy a house. So the idea of what's today called embedded finance or contextual finance, technology enabled all that. So the last 20 years has been, how do you think of a different kind of banking leveraging technology? And that's what, we started very early saying we want to create a different kind of bank and we leverage technology to do that. Fast forward, I don't think that journey is over. I think we're in early stages of that journey. So I don't think it's a change in the face, but there is that plus. And I think there are two big things which are happening. One's obviously AI. Reed, as you can see, I have a lot of time for him. In the 70s, he'd once come up with this acronym of 5 I's. Individual banking, institutional banking, investment banking, insurance banking, and information banking. And I look back and think 40 years at a time, he was the first guy who saw that information by itself could be a banking asset. And today with AI and data, information is the banking asset. So how do you leverage it in different ways? Huge opportunity. And we just, as an industry, we're barely scratching the surface, right?
Okay, I'm going to make a small shift in this dialogue because it is a very good dialogue. But we have a time hard stop because I would love Tan Shushan to say a few words. And I wanted to transition that into what Shushan has to say because she has got a very important appointment to run to. So why don't I do this? I'd like to pause our conversation, invite Shushan up to say a few words in commendation to Piyush and maybe a commentary on the industry itself.
So I will say a few words about Piyush, if I may. I will have to say that, he has done a phenomenal job as a leader, as a friend. But more importantly, he's shown all of us, 48,000 people, how to go into the unknown. If you think about going from damn bloody slow to best digital bank in the world, that transition, you can't just do with your head. You have to do with your heart. And so bringing all 48,000 of us to be united by this common goal, to be able to look ahead and not really know what the road will be, but to all go towards that goal, takes a very special kind of person and a very special kind of leader. One that can see the big picture, but yet drill into the nitty-gritty. For all of us here from DBS who've had to suffer 15 years of CEO reviews, let me tell you, appendix page 106, item 3.1.5, you don't know the answer to that, you are toast. Okay? So we were all drilled in the mechanics of know your stuff. Sorry, you can't interrupt. And yet, have that helicopter vision of where do you want to go? Why do you want to go there? How are you going to get there? Is the prize worth winning? And very often in those reviews, I would sometimes get confused by Piyush because he'll say, go for it. And then he will question me like 1,000 times, why are you going for it? You know? But then I realized that was how he also had to justify to himself, right? Are we taking the right path? Have we looked at every single negative raccoon? We call it raccoon, spelled with the W-R-E-C-K, wreck. Have we wrecked our own ideas? Have we looked at this idea from every corner? What could go wrong? And if we could take the risk that goes with it, go for it. So whilst he's this inspirational leader that takes you where no leader dares go, he's also that nitty-gritty operations, finance, tech guy that looks at every single stone along the way. If you step on it, what can go wrong? Which is why when he said earlier on the tech resiliency thing, honestly, I haven't seen anyone take full accountability aside. He's taught us all about take accountability, be on the cold face, and face the music, right? So I think that culture of ownership, accountability, and most importantly, purpose has already been inculcated in DBS. The three modes that I like to talk about: the digital mode, the data mode, but also the way we work modes, right? These are three incredible distance that I think we've built internally that has given me a good platform, hopefully, to navigate a very difficult path forward, because the world is getting more and more turbulent. But whenever I complain about turbulence and him, he's like, come on, right? The world's always been turbulent, right? So it's really the way we've organized. The most difficult thing, I think, for all of us was changing the way we operate from vertical to horizontal. And we wanted to do it 2016. We thought we're not ready. 2019, we're not ready. 2020, we started the work, and it was tough. But today, because we manage through data, we have live dashboards. We have people from tech, ops, HR, product, RMs, whatever, treasury. We're all working in a horizontal journey, purely focused on getting the customer's job done well, quickly, getting the satisfaction scores, and of course, then getting the business that comes with it. That's a very different way of working. And that takes a special kind of leader to break operational, vertical silos that were already working, making it horizontal, and coming up with new ways of operating. It was hard, right? Putting in data, putting all our data, into a data lake, that took years. So he was prepared to take those long-term, difficult bets, change the structure to break things so that we can now be future ready. Today with Gen AI, to us, that's the most profound change. And I think collectively as a leadership team and collectively with 48,000 people, we're ready to take on that challenge, ready to say, we will go agentic. We will use machine learning, AI, because we've done it before with AI, non-agentic AI. We've done it before with models. We've done it before with becoming more digital, et cetera, et cetera. So if you've gone through these different phases of change and you've prevailed, there's no reason why you can't prevail. You will fail along the way, but take those failures by the chin and move on. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Piyush.
Thank you. Thank you.
He was just the most, but he's left his phone, constantly open for dialogue with me. I do call him to bitch now and then. And he's always, he's always been giving me good advice.
Let me not make it too easy for both of you.
Oh.
Okay, the one question I wanted to ask you is, what was your advice going to be to your successor? And one question I wanted to ask you, Suchan, was, where does his legacy end and your story start?
My advice to those, be yourself. And on Sushant's got very different strengths. She said it well. She wears different shoes from my shoes. I've got big shoes. She wears different shoes. There are a lot of things she's not better than I am. Right? As long as the fundamentals of how we work, the culture, etc., is enabling, you got to express it in your own way. You cannot continue to do what I do because I do things very, very differently.
I mean, it's for me. Look, we've been working together for 15 years, but I am different. My leadership style is different. Interestingly enough, that the team is actually very similar. We've moved some people around, we've changed, but my style is different, but the fundamentals don't change. The culture, the purpose doesn't change, but the focus might be different. There might be some strategic differences that we've taken along the way. But there's some big things that we fully agree on, like what do we stand for? We're going to be an Asian bank for New Asia. We're going to be a purpose-driven bank. We're going to be a best bank for better world. Those things you don't take lightly. Those things you make that change and you go forward. And those big fundamental things don't change. But along the way, we've taken different focuses. Focusing maybe on wealth management versus more retail, maybe focusing on financial institutions, maybe focusing on trade with the Middle East. There are a lot of opportunities that will change as the world changes that we will seize going forward, but the fundamentals don't change.
And this was one of the most magical moments in the transition from Piyush to Sushant. So I want to thank both of you for making this moment possible. And it came about because of time constraints. So thank you for being here.
Yes.
Thank
you.
Thank And so, now that we've got Sushant out of the way, as in because of a time constraint, we can spend a bit more time. We can go back to being a little relaxed and maybe take on some of the other commentaries that we've had asked people to prepare. And actually, I have another couple of questions to ask you. In fact, we can have lunch served, while we're going into this phase of the conversation. Another magic that you've worked within the institution is the matrix that you put in place, the way in which you structure the data, the points and the data that you wanted to look at to tell your story. And I've personally seen how you've worked with Tim Sok Hui, your CFO, and I travel around the world. I meet with chairmen, with CEOs and CFOs of banks of many kinds. And I'll say this with all sincerity, that the matrix that Sok Hui had given you is world-class, is inspiring, and it's instructive to banks around the world, not just in Singapore. Tell us a little bit about the structure that you put in place in GBS.
Actually, so the thing about an organization structure is not the structure so much as role clarity. And so we're not very different. We have the head of business segments, we have the head of geography, we have support functions and so on. But I found through my years of experience that large organizations create complexity through matrix management, and that's because nobody knows who's really calling the shots with regards to what. And so very early, we as a management team spent 2 or 3 days and came up with the concept of decisioning authorities. Who should make what kind of decisions? And we went step by step. So what decisions are best made in the country, what are best made by business segment, what are just made. I put it in a 5-page document called Rules of the Road. And we encapsulate saying this is how we're going to manage the company, right? For what? And over my 15 years, every year, we spend 2-3 hours going back and revisiting that and saying, hey, where's the noise? Where is the friction? And do we need to tease it out and iron it out? So a way of working is always being to me the mother. You got to work on that. So Sushant has talked about over time, we also moved on to, getting tech and product together. Now we call it managing through journeys, horizontal. All of those reflect not org structure so much, but ways of working. On the specific question of the metrics that we have, Sok Hui had already started this. She's been a fantastic CFO. She became CFO a year or so before I joined. And she did a couple of things early, which I just leaned into. One, she created the corporate treasury function, which is balance sheet and capital management. And we, correctly moved it out of markets where normally resides in, which is always, I think, a bad idea, this conflict. And second, she started this process of thinking about MIS. I was dumbfounded when I came. DPS had terrible MIS. We were flying blind. I mean, we were lucky to have just legal vehicle finance. My first business review, all people could tell me is the loan pipeline. We had no knowledge of which customer was profitable or in branch. So with Soccer, we started working through how do we take this MIS and metric thing from there to first level, just best in class along multinational banks. But then how do you take it to outstrip multinational banks? So your comments are completely spot on, man. Today we have instant real-time to the minute DBS has. P&L, balance sheet, capital, returns, by segment, and also by everything else. So we wanted to start measuring in 2016. I said, look, we're digitizing. Everybody is talking of the value of digital. But how do you demonstrate to a shareholder that you can see some value from this in shareholder value? So we worked and came up with this concept of digital value capture. And Sokwi and the team did a fantastic job trying to figure a model to say, how do you capture the value of digital, which you can see in ROE, in shareholder return? And we were able to demonstrate that through data warehouses. More recently, then I challenged them. I said, I want to start capturing the two more, value of artificial intelligence. How do I, everybody said AI is fantastic, but how do I demonstrate to somebody that we capture value of AI? So through A/B testing, they came up with a whole measurement thing so we can measure what is the delta from AI. And now as we started to say, okay, we're now running the company through these 70 different horizontal journeys. How do we capture the value of running horizontally? There's got to be a way to do it. So in all of the cases, we did a lot of thinking about how would we be able to demonstrate success? What do we need to capture to be able to do that? What do we need to measure? What is the data warehouses and data capability you need to be able to build that? And so it's been systematic over the years. But our finance function has been fantastic as a partner in doing this.
Okay, to underscore what you've just described to us, and to change the format a little bit to make it more homely and cozy, as given the people who are here in this room today, I'd like now to invite Sokwi to come up and give your commendation to Piyush and maybe validate some of the things that he's been saying.
So, this is a surprise, but Piyush has always been very visionary. He was the one who pushed us to say, we must be able to find a methodology that the markets can understand the value that digital is creating in the organization, because it's so hard. Nobody can do it. Everybody talks about it, but talk is cheap. So how do we demonstrate that within our customer segment, that there are traditional customers, there are digital customers, and as their behavior change, can we convert traditional customers to digital customers? And when they convert, do they actually buy more products? Do we cross-sell better? And how do we demonstrate that? Because we can prove that the ROE and the cost-to-income ratio of the digital segment is actually superior to the traditional segment. So Piyush pushed us very hard to say, measure it, go to the market with it. And our board was like, are you ready? Do you have enough time series to actually prove it? So Emmanuel actually interviewed me, and then he wrote a very critical report because I think it's right that we should put our methodology to the market. It's right that it should be critiqued. But I'm very pleased to say that we did this and we showcased this in 2017. We went back in 2023 and we told the market that we're going to convert so many X numbers of traditional customers to digital customers. And with that, we can demonstrate that the cross-sell was better, the volume of transaction was better when they become more digital. And actually, it was accelerated by COVID. People had no choice but to go and become more digital because the branches are not open. So we were actually able to prove our case. But Piyush was always somebody who said, show me DVC 1.0. Then he said, show me DVC 2.0. And then he sort of said, give me a horizontal P&L. I said, Piyush, there's nobody who does a horizontal P&L. Everybody measures vertical P&Ls, all properly reconciled, product P&L, segment P&L, country P&L. It forms the basis of bonus. He said, no, you must create a horizontal P&L. And that was like, okay, it's on my scorecard. We talked about the scorecard, and we said, okay, can we do a pilot to see whether it works? And we're able to actually create a horizontal P&L for each of the journeys. Can you imagine we are run by journeys? That's how we run this horizontal journeys to break the vertical silos. So you have relationship managers, compliance risk managers, everybody trying to actually become obsessed with what the customer wants. But for that to happen, you need a dashboard of performance, of saying if we experiment differently, do we get different results? And that was quite a challenge, but we were able, after a year, for me to go back to Piyush and said, Piyush, we piloted, we tested, and we can do it because our data lake that we set up was actually built based on the customer level, aggregated by all the types of transactions. So again, it was another breakthrough. But Piyush is the type of boss that challenges us quite a lot to really sort of get out of our thinking so that we can actually demonstrate a different way of working. And the horizontal organization, like Sushan says, is actually bringing out a lot of value. Because for 48,000 people to be able to work horizontally is actually a culture change, a mindset change. I must tell you, the other thing we say in DBS is Piyush is a chat GPT. It's amazing. I don't know how he sort of connects so many dots, but when you listen to him, and people come for meetings to be scolded, but also to learn. But to learn, everybody, I tell you, after a meeting with Piyush, goes away becoming a lot sharper, a lot clearer in the focus. And Piyush has trained and changed the mindset of 48,000 people in DBS. Thanks, Piyush.
Thank you, Sophie.
You would have been nothing if not for Sokui.
I have.
So we actually, it's the whole thing. I keep telling people, it's a team effort. Before, one person can't do anything. So part of the thing is how do you find, and by the way, remember, a lot of people say you got new people to do stuff. Sokui has been around 40 years. So she was an old original team. So I was able to harness the energies of a lot of people together. But Sokui has been invaluable.
I've known Sokui when she was CFO before you joined, and I saw how she blossomed and created new dimensions, which through my travels, I heard her getting mentioned in Rwanda. The National Bank in Rwanda says that reading your matrix was required reading for the board every year. So that's how far you go. So the question here is, how did someone who studied at St. Stephen's College, liberal arts, even get a job with Citibank, which at that time the American MNCs were hiring IIC engineering graduates. How do you manage to slip into the system? And how does someone with an economics degree, a liberal arts degree, from a fairly left-leaning college, find his way into mainstream capitalist structures and work alongside engineers?
Well, first of all, it was a bit of an accident in the sense that after my St. Stephen's economics degree, I did an MBA. And so all the banks hired MBA students, and I had the requisite MBA, if you will. The other reflection, somebody recently wrote a book on the rise of the Indian CEO, and they pointed out that by and large, 80-90% of Indian CEOs have an engineering IIT background. But they picked up only a couple of non-engineering colleges in India where they said these are really professional training colleges. And so Ajay Banga, World Bank chairman, Ivan Menezes was the CEO of Diageo, myself, we all came from St. Stephen's. So they picked up a couple of colleges and said these are really not liberal arts colleges, they're professional training grounds, if you will. But I have to also hasten to add that I think economics is a very good discipline if you want to be a banker. A large part of banking is about understanding macroeconomics. The growth, inflation dilemma and how do you press the button, that's fundamental to a large part of banking. So my liberal arts education was not entirely wasted.
At the same time, you seem to have pivoted a way into technology a lot. You talk about it very instinctively and so on. But a lot of the battle in banking is still balance sheet.
Yeah. So it's both. This why it's always so important. So, when I joined DBS, I realized that the lowest hanging fruit came from balance sheet. We were just misusing our balance sheet. Our loan deposit ratio in the Sing dollar book was 55%. And you don't have to be a genius to know if you're taking 100 in deposits and paying people and only putting 55 in loans, I mean, you have a problem, right? So that's the fundamental thing of how do you balance the balance sheet. And that focuses you on what businesses are appropriate to build and what capital and how do you allocate capital. So I think that's still very fundamental to running a good bank. Exactly like credit risk is fundamental to running a good bank. But it is also true that technology is hugely important. And in fact, it's part of the Citibank training. I'd done one course in computer programming in my business school, and those were the days of punch cards, right, and the old mainframes. I really, didn't have too much background. But when Citibank decided to automate in the early mid-'80s, they let people like me, young kids, lead the charge on automation. So you didn't have a choice. You had to learn how to use. I remember we imported the first computers into India, and the guys of telex machines because you weren't allowed to import computers. And we learned a little bit about, file structures and how do you automate and so on. But the biggest is, again, he just gone, but in the late 90s, Citibank just let me loose and let me build the biggest e-commerce platforms in GT at that time. And you were way ahead of the curve building e-commerce platforms, intranet platforms, internet platforms. So I learned on the job, as it were. I ran a technology data center, I still remember, in Bombay. And the floods came a month later. We just created the data center, flooded the whole data center. So we had to move the computer machine to the stairwell and bring in piped air conditioners. So you learn by doing these things.
At this point, I want to invite a third person who is not from DBS, very important, to give us his perspective of what DBS looked like to him from the outside looking in. I'd like to invite the CEO of Baiduri Bank, T. Eng Hui, to give us his sense. And also the other thing is he's also not ex-Citibank. There's a Citibank mafia,
I think he's like Citibank.
I thought you were Stan Chart, but then...
I'm actually ex-CD and ex-Stan Chart.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Emmanuel, for inviting me to join this special luncheon in recognition of Piyush's achievement. Very nice to see all of you here. My 40 years of banking with Citi, we had the same chair, John Reed, at a point in time. In fact, I have worked with many banking leaders in my 40 years of career, starting with David Conner. Some of you may know David Conner, who was a CEO of OCBC when he retired from Citi. Peter Sia, chairman of DBS, used to work in Citibank Brunei, for those of you who don't know this information. And when I moved to Sanchat, I had a benefit of working with Philip Payat, who is also associated with DBS at one point in time. So I've worked with very good banking leaders in the region from Citi. And when I joined Baiduri, I also had the benefit of working with a board member, the late Bertie Chang, who was the MD and CEO of Post Office Bank. So he sit at the board of Baiduri Bank. And being an ex-Citi and ex-Sanchat banker, I've always monitored the progress of senior leaders in the region. And being the CEO of Baiduri Bank over the last 6 years, I've seen my team's engagement with DBS. And based on my experience of dealing with DBS 20 years ago, and now over the last 6 years, things has really changed a lot. And I can see that DBS has transformed. So in fact, DBS transformation is something that we monitor very closely in Baiduri Bank and see how a bank that's basically based in Singapore, focused on Singapore initially, expand into the region and become one of the largest banks in Southeast Asia. In fact, the largest and one of the largest in the world. So it's an amazing story. It's an amazing Singapore success story that we want to learn, and we monitor closely the digital transformation of DBS, the business strategy, And most importantly is that Piyush has built a wonderful team, really. When you talk about leadership, it's really about not just, technology and business strategy. It's also how you build the team. And that's something that, Piyush has done a wonderful job. So Piyush, your influence is not just in Singapore. Your influence is even in a small country like Brunei, not too far away. So congratulations on the achievement. And I will be happy to be able to invite you one day to Brunei to share the success stories on how, Brunei, like Singapore, aim higher. And Singapore has been on the world stage. And definitely the story of DBS Bank on how it has grown from its Singapore bank, become a big global bank. So it's something, a good story to tell. And I think that story can inspire a lot of people around the world, including Brunei. So I hope to see you one day in Brunei. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you a last question before I let you go. But, this is an afternoon with friends. So, it can be a continuing conversation. And we have Chia Song Hui from Temasek here. Now, I'm not going to ask you to say anything, but your number one shareholder is sitting right in front of you. Oh, very happy shareholder. A very happy shareholder. I think, and a very consequential shareholder. I think I calculated this on ChatGPT. Temasek made about $46 million, both in capital appreciation and dividends in the time that Piyush was still counting. And still counting, right? And I'm also a shareholder, and my entire CPF is on DBS because there's nothing else to buy in Singapore. And I bought it at $16 in
Genius.
Yeah. Here, in this last question, I want you to capture something. This relationship with your institutional shareholders and the magic that you brought on the share price, because many banks in Southeast Asia, especially after the 1996 crisis, got their shops in order, ran very good institutions, maintained good governance and all of that, but very few made that breakthrough, even one-time book and then two-time book. What's the magic there? What's the relationships that need to go and the investments you need to make that share price magic happen?
Well, first of all, I'm never bothered about the share price. The only thing I don't have on my KPI is never, from day one, I told the board, I can't control the share price, especially in a market like Singapore, where macro is far more important than micro. Singapore's stock market goes 20% up and down, depending on what's happening in China, nothing to do with individual performance. So not bothered about it. However, the underlying fundamental, the value creation at Fibercare, it's a function of ROE and growth. So you just strip down any market creation and multiplication. So what kind of ROE can you create and what kind of growth can you do? And by and large, I had this debate with Dilhan not that far ago. He said most people, you're either a dividend paying, so you're a cash stock, or you're a growth stock. And as you look at DBS's history, we've been both dividend and growth. We've been growing at 8-10%, which in our industry over 15 years, CAGR 8-10% growth is extraordinary. And we've been running the highest ROE in most developed market world. We generate 17% ROE, 18% ROE. So when you match a high ROE, top 10 percentile, with a solid growth rate, multiple starts are expanding. I mean, this is the fundamental number that trend. However, there's more to the story. Since your point is correct. The first is that investors have long memories. And so I still remember I was so frustrated, so used to come with me. We started 2010, we started demonstrating good financial performance. And so at the end of 2010, 4 quarters, at the end of 11, 8 quarters, at the end of 12 quarters. At 12 or 16 quarters of continuous quarterly growth. And every time I went to investors and said, why are you not rewarding us for consistency? And they would say, oh, but I remember what happened you said 10 years ago, 8 years ago. So my first lesson was investors' memories are long, and it takes a long time to regain and rebuild credit. I said the same thing to James Fraser last month. I said, don't give up hope, it's just investors take a long time. So you got to keep working with investors. And then in the investors, they've got to see credibility. What is your story? What are you setting out to do? How do you demonstrate on a continuous basis that you're making progress? So I think that is how. The other is what we already talked about, that everybody talks stories, you've got to be able to support it with data. And so our whole focus in saying, how do you show the breadcrumbs between what you're doing and ROE? And every time you can show the breadcrumbs, people start buying in and believing that. A third thing was just brand recognition. And Brenda's in the room. She runs study marketing. My challenge to the marketing team very early on was you've got to make sure that the brand stands for something that is recognized. We are today recognized in Singapore, maybe Southeast Asia. How do you first get Asian recognition? And we set ourselves this goal to be recognized as Asia's best bank. A large part of that was reaching out to media, reaching out to PR, being able to tell our story. And then 2, 3, 4 years on, I said, I need this, everybody in the world to know DBS. And so, which means how do you reach out to Financial Times and Global Finance and Euromoney and, the global media? I had a small bank in Singapore. Yeah, but, step by step, you already recognize this very early in 2013. But, when you try to figure that all of these publications, their universe is 10, 15 banks. They look at the biggest banks in the world. Why wouldn't they even pay attention to a mid-sized bank from a small country in Singapore? They got to figure what story and what narrative will work with these kinds of people and what are they looking for. So you got to sweat some of this stuff as well.
You read my blog, I was the critic on the idea of the world's best bank. I thought, and I still think, that there's no such thing. In fact, when you were getting recognized, I was in Shenzhen. Huawei is from Shenzhen. There's a bank there called, China Merchants Bank, 200 million customers. And here's a bank with 5 million customers claiming to be the world's best bank. So that was my, my thing with my beef with Piyush. There is no such thing. But you make use of that brand and that recognition to build the substance behind it. So, the marketing part, I don't hold it against you at all. The other aspect was the fact that you started with a franchise that's already very strong. You had 60% of the mortgage market in Singapore. You had the lowest cost of funds because of your deposit base. And then I think you sent me an email once. You said, "Oh, you think it's a net interest margin game? It isn't. It's more than that, or something like that." And I said to you, Piyush, we'll discuss this after you retire. And we'll have a continuing conversation on that. But you did inherit an inherently strong institution, and then you took it in flight. And I think that with those comments, I'd like to thank you for spending this time on the stage with me. And for the people who came up, I think it came up very naturally. And this is a continuing conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Piyush for this slide. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel and Mr. Gupta.
I will give you a glimpse. The Award for Lifetime Achievement Leadership in Financial Services is named after. Ladies and gentlemen, Louis William Bill Seidman was born on 29 April 1921 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He epitomized the best of American public service, distinguished himself through a career that seamlessly bridged the private sector, academia, and high-level public service roles. After serving as a naval officer during World War II, Seidman earned degrees from Dartmouth College, Harvard Law School, and the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business. He went on to lead his family accounting firm, Seidman & Seidman, before entering public life. In 1974, President Gerald Ford appointed him as assistant to the President for Economic Affairs, where he played a pivotal role in shaping policy during a period of significant economic turbulence. He later served as Dean of the College of Business at Arizona State University from 1982 to 1985, contributing significantly to the institution's growth and influence. Seidman boasts that defining public service came as chairman of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation from 1985 to 1991. During that period, he was at the helm of managing the fallout from the infamous savings and loan crisis. one of the most challenging episodes in American financial industry history. He also served as the first chairman of the Resolution Trust Corporation, which was established specifically to resolve that crisis. In recounting his role during this period, he often shared stories of how he had to strike a delicate balance between compassion and structure in dealing with what was essentially a systemic failure in the US banking system. He spoke of mom and pop banks on Main Street in small town America, family-run institutions that found themselves unable to keep up with the rapid changes triggered by the then floating of the US dollar in March of 1973, along with other major currencies, and the resulting volatility in interest and exchange rates. This shifts place enormous strain on this bank's simple balance sheet, particularly managing the cost of funds. Seidman recalled how presidents of these small community banks would come to his office asking for deferments, extension, or regulatory relief. These not made out of negligence, but of desperation to survive. Seidman always received them with empathy, listened carefully, and responded with integrity, but never lost sight of his mission, which is to protect the integrity and stability of the entire financial system. His ability to be humane without compromising the clarity of his mandate was part of what earned him such widespread respect. Beyond his domestic achievement, Seidman represented the United States on the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. He played a role in the development of the Basel I framework finalized in 1988, which laid the foundation of modern capital adequacy standards in global banking. In later years, he became a well-regarded financial commentator on CNBC, among others, media, and remained active in financial reform discourse. His association with the Asian banker began in the early 2000s. He was a keynote at the Asian Bankers Summit in 2005, which of the 2025 edition will be holding in Jakarta next week. And he returned for subsequent conferences. He later became an advisor to the Asian Banker programs and traveled extensively with us across the region, to China, Indonesia, here in Singapore, Thailand, and even Vietnam. And even at an advanced age, he remained passionate about Asia's growing financial sector and about mentoring the new generation of banking leaders. Bill Seidman kept his approach to leadership simple and pragmatic. He believed in direct, measurable solution and a natural instinct for cutting through complexity to focus on what truly matters. As an advisor to our program, he brought that same clarity, reminding us always to look for character, competency, and consistency in leadership. And this is the spirit and the value he embodies and which he views this award, the William Bill Seidman Award for Lifetime Achievement in Leadership in Financial Services, after him. And enduring tribute to a remarkable man who gave so much to the speech and those around him. And as we prepare for presentation of the award to Piyush Gupta, let me invite on stage again Dr. Gordon Director.
Let's invite Mr. Emmanuel Daniel first for the citation, and then we'll have you up as well.
Indeed. Gives me great pleasure to read the citation in the presentation of this award. In the vast expanse of the banking industry, teeming with talent and passion across countries like Singapore, across Asia and around the world, identifying a singular individual who embodies these qualities is no small feat. Yet each year, we have to identify one such individual, not to merely recognize the achievement, but to present them as a beacon of inspiration to the next generation. Banking is a complex industry. Many professionals, though exceptional in their specializations, remain within their niches. However, a select few transcend these boundaries, enhancing leadership roles that demand a holistic understanding of multifaceted challenges from product innovation, market dynamics to regulatory landscapes and shareholder interests. Piyush Gupta's journey began in India at a liberal arts college in Delhi, progressing to get an MBA in a school that was known more for producing public intellectuals than corporate titans. But then we were told there were a few. In 1982, he embarked on his professional voyage with Citibank India as a management trainee at a time when Citibank was hiring talent from the engineering cohort. But over the years, he undertook diverse roles across multiple geographies, including Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, moving his family and his own fortune across markets, acquiring important skills, but more importantly, leaving a memory of him having been part of those communities. It is perhaps one of the most important criteria of leaders of today, that we will not just be able to transcend our own skill sets, but also our own cultures and our own areas of comfort, go into lands and opportunities of which we know very little. In 2000, driven by an entrepreneurial spirit, Piyush ventured into the startup realm. He initiated a .com enterprise aimed at developing platforms spanning a wide variety of retail services. It failed, but the seeds of its experience set in place and became the plant that grew to create new core competencies, emphasizing the importance of building robust platforms and understanding the realities of markets. Returning to Citigroup in 2001, he ascended and culminated his role as CEO for Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. In 2009, Piyush took the helm at DBS Bank. At this juncture, the bank's stock price hovered around $9. Under his stewardship, DBS underwent a transformative journey as demonstrated in stock price peaking at approximately $48 in 2024. He spearheaded the franchise of the bank, expanded into difficult markets like India, enhanced its ownership and operations in China, acquired a bank in Indonesia, and solidified DBS's position as a formidable Asian financial institution, representing a country, but also representing a whole region and the dynamics of that region projecting into the rest of the world. Piyush defined an era in the banking industry, an era that may well be in its descendancy, but an era that is hallmarked by a change in the way in which banks treated technology. In the past, banks were buyers of technology, buyers from vendors, and were passive users. Recognizing the strategic imperative of technology integration, he embarked on a journey to embed technology into the very fabric of the institution. This journey evolved over time, mirroring the rapid transformation of technology itself. Initially, the focus was on expanding in-house capabilities by hiring more coders to develop applications internally. But technology itself was changing. The advent of outsourcing, cloud computing, open source coding, the deployment of technology required not just skill, but an instinct to understand where it was taking us. This whole direction brought new challenges and failures. The downtimes that DBS faced several times during his time as leader attracted incredible criticisms. But he never lost sight of the journey that he had put the institution on, and he never lost sight to the belief of what the institution was capable of becoming. But perhaps most important, as we have heard today, was his impact on people. As a leader of a complex institution, that impact has to come at several layers. It has to come structurally, putting in place the matrix, the structure by which people can find themselves in a complex institution. But then it also has to inspire at a personal level. Individuals have to feel that they are part of the story, and that they have to feel that they are part of a journey for which they do not yet understand where it will take them. And that journey continues even today. And we've heard today from the people who are taking the journey to the next level, the legacy that Piyush had created for them. Many men and women in the world are presented with the opportunities to make the most of their careers and make a difference in the lives of those around them. A few are given the opportunity to spearhead a new era in the industry that they serve, and even make a huge difference in countries and cultures where they've stepped on. But from that few, only a few will be able to take advantage of those opportunities and make something that they can leave as a legacy, leave as footsteps for others to walk on. And Piyush, you are one such man. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in honoring Piyush Gupta, a paragon of leadership and the deserving recipient of the 2025 William Bill Seidman Leadership Achievement Award.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is heavy, yes. And the joints.
Okay, look over here. We'll take a few photos, and then afterwards, I'd like to invite Mr. Gupta to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, brother.
And a big round of applause, please.
Let me start with a big thank you to Tab and to Emmanuel Gordian for doing me this honor of a Lifetime Achievement Award. As several of you know, I've done 43 years in banking, and it is a lifetime. I think Emmanuel asked the right questions about phases in the industry over these 4 decades. And truth be told, the industry has changed considerably in this period of time. I worked in 2 institutions in my career, Citi and DBS, and I've been privileged that I owe substantially to both of them. I did 28 years at Citi, so a large part of everything I know about banking was learned in that hallowed institution. It was a great training ground. It took a chance on people very early. It stretched you and gave you the opportunity to learn about cultures, nuances, and people. My last 16 years at DBS, though, have perhaps been even more rewarding. It's rare that circumstances allow you to helm an institution at a point in time where you can really make a difference. A listed board-run company with the backing of a stakeholder and board to let you do things and reimagine and redefine the nature of banking itself. I feel privileged that in my journey, I think I've been able to make a contribution to rethinking what a bank could be. We set ourselves this mission at DBS to try and be a different kind of bank, a technology-driven bank, but really centered around the customer and the customer promise, and a bank who paid more than lip service to the idea of purpose and mission, trying to do real things for real people. As I look back, that is my biggest source of satisfaction, at having been able to make the dream of a best bank for a better world come alive. But in addition to everything we did with the bank, perhaps I need to go back and touch on an even more singular facet of my career, which is the large numbers of people and friends that I've made over these 4 decades. All of you who are here today represent in many ways some of them. People I've touched through the 90s and 2000s and so on. I sometimes joke at the ABS ceremonies, half of the room has worked with me or for me at some point in time. But that is really special. Finally, when it's all said and done, People remember you for what you did for them, what you did for their careers, how you made them feel, and how you gave to them as individuals. But equally, as I look back at my career, I also reflect mostly on that. The interaction with individuals, the interaction with people, building leaders, helping people become better versions of themselves. So I feel grateful, not just for the platforms I was given, but I feel grateful for the opportunity to work with such an incredible bunch of people over the years. My last comment is a comment on our industry. You know, over the years, and I alluded to it, especially in and around the GFC, our industry as a reputation got somewhat tarnished. People saw us as egregious, self-serving, looking after, lining our own pockets. But some years ago, when we were trying to think about a mission and purpose for DBS, we kept coming back to a fundamental point that actually this is a good industry. It's an industry that has had consequence over centuries. It's an industry that helps people save. It's an industry that helps poor people become rich, help you get a house, help you get a car, and help a small business become a big business. That's not bad stuff. A large part of the infrastructure of the modern day that we see today is a function of the financial services industry. And we should take pride in what we've been able to do individually and collectively in making that world come true. And therefore, as we look forward to the future of the industry, we need to continue to reflect on our roots and continue to take similar amount of pride about what we can be and what we can do. I do think we have the opportunity to transform lives. I do think we have the opportunity to build large job farms. I think we have the opportunity to make customer impact, to reimagine and continue to rethink the nature of value. And if we're focused on doing this, then there is no doubt in my mind that the coming decades for our industry will be as consequential, as glorious as our history and our past have been. Once again, a big thank you to the Asian Banker TAB for the honor, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. Cheers.
Congratulations once again, Mr. Piyush Gupta, on your amazing journey and all of your achievements.